For 7 rainless months, the village of Dobrava baked beneath a pitiless sky. The fields cracked open like old bones. The wheat died where it stood. The wells coughed up mud. Chickens vanished from their coops. Dogs whined at empty air. And the river that had once fed the village shrank into a black ribbon winding through stone and rot. At night, the elders said they could hear something moving beneath the water. Not fish, not current. Something old, something waiting. The people of Dobrava had always feared the river, though they depended on it as a starving child depends on a cruel mother. Their grandfathers had left gifts on its banks once, bread, milk, carved idols of oak. But the new priest had called those offerings sinful. Pagan filth, he had said, superstition, the old gods were dead. So the gifts stopped. And then the drought came. By the 7th month, fear had ripened into madness. Children grew thin. Men fought over moldy grain. Mothers boiled nettles and leather to make soup. And when the cattle began to die with their tongues swollen and black, the village gathered in the square beneath the dead linden tree and demanded an answer. It was old Yarema who first spoke the forbidden name. The Vodyanoi. A silence fell over the crowd. Even the priest crossed himself. The river spirit is angered, Yarema said, his voice dry as ash. Our fathers knew the price of water. We forgot. Now the river remembers. The priest, Father Mikhail, stepped forward in his black robe, pale with hunger and outrage. There is no river spirit. There is only God testing us. But the villagers did not look at him. Their eyes drifted instead toward the edge of the square, where a young woman stood alone with a basket of dried herbs in her hands. Mila. She was 20 years old, quiet, sharp-eyed, and strange in the way beautiful things often are when they do not belong to a place. She lived in a hut beyond the willow grove, where her mother had once treated fevers, births, and broken bones. People came to Mila in secret for remedies, though in public they called her witch. Some said the river never wet the hem of her dress when she crossed it. Some said fish gathered near her ankles when she stood in the shallows. Some said her mother had not died of fever at all, but had walked into the water one moonless night and never returned. The oldest women in the crowd began to murmur. She is marked. She was born during the spring flood. The river knows her. Mila did not move. Only her grip tightened on the basket until the dried stems inside snapped. Father Mikhail turned to the crowd. You would murder a girl to save yourselves? No, said Yarema. We would give the river what it asks. And how do you know what it asks? At that, Yarema looked toward Mila with cold certainty. Because it has not taken her already. The crowd shifted. Hunger had stripped away shame. Men who once tipped their caps to Mila now stared as if she were livestock. Women she had helped in childbirth lowered their eyes. Desperation is a quick butcher of conscience. Mila finally spoke. If the river wanted me, it would come for me itself. An old woman spat into the dust. Maybe it already did. No one defended her. Not one voice. That night they came with rope and lanterns. Mila did not scream when they broke down her door. She did not beg as they bound her wrists. She only searched the faces in the torchlight, as if hoping to find one human soul left among them. Instead, she found only fear. And in fear's shadow, cruelty. They dragged her through the village to the riverbank, where the cracked earth gave way to wet black mud. The moon hung above them, thin and white as a dead eye. The river moved slowly, almost lazily, but there was something wrong with its surface. It did not reflect the stars. It seemed to swallow light whole. Father Mikhail stood at the bank, shaking. He had come to stop them, perhaps, or to witness, perhaps to save his own authority. But when the villagers pushed Mila to her knees, he said nothing. Yarema stepped forward, holding an old carved idol, half rotted by time. "My father buried this when the church was built," he said. "Tonight, we remember the old law." Mila raised her face to him, muddy hair clinging to her cheeks. "You feed your terror and call it law." Yarema's mouth twitched. "If your blood buys rain, then you should be grateful." Mila laughed then. A small, bitter sound. "Rain will not come for what you are about to do." The villagers hesitated. Then someone shoved her. She fell into the river with a single splash and vanished beneath the black water. The surface closed over her like a mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the river began to boil. The water churned in widening rings. Bubbles rose from below, fat and stinking, carrying the smell of rot, weeds, and old graves. The mud on the banks trembled. Something brushed against the ankles of the nearest villagers, and they stumbled back in panic. A hand broke the surface. Pale, slender. Then another. Mila emerged from the river slowly, not dragged by the current, but lifted, as though the water itself had become a throne beneath her. Her dress clung to her skin like drowned silk. Her hair hung heavy and black. Her eyes were no longer their natural gray. Now they shone green as deep water under moonlight. And behind her, shapes rose from the river. Tall, bent figures draped in reeds and slime, faces hidden behind curtains of riverweed, fingers long and jointed like the legs of spiders, empty sockets gleaming with cold blue light. The drowned. The river dead. A scream ripped through the crowd. Father Mikhail fell to his knees, crossing himself so hard his fingers bled. But Mila only stood there, waist deep in the water, calm as winter. Then the river parted behind her. Something vast moved beneath the surface. At first it seemed like the shadow of a tree drifting upstream. Then it rose higher, and the villagers saw a massive figure seated upon a throne of roots and sunken branches, skin the color of drowned bark, hair like green moss trailing to the water, eyes pale and round as moons beneath a swamp, a beard tangled with shells, bones, and silver fishhooks. The Vodyanoi. He was not merely a monster. He was ancient, a thing carved from the river's first darkness. When he spoke, his voice sounded like water poured into a grave. "You give me a bride," he said, "but not as gift." The villagers backed away in terror. Yarema dropped the idol into the mud. The Vodyanoi's gaze drifted across them, and reeds burst from the earth where his eyes passed. "You bring me fear. You bring me lies. You break the old pacts, poison the banks, strip the willows, dam the streams, and when the river thirsts, you cast your own blood into my mouth and call it worship." His eyes settled on Mila. But unlike the others, she did not flinch. "You are your mother's daughter," he said. Mila bowed her head once, not in submission, in recognition. The villagers stared. Father Mikhail whispered, "What is she?" Mila turned toward them slowly. There was sorrow in her face now, but no mercy. "My mother was keeper of the ford, her mother before her, before your church," before your bells, before your fathers cut down the sacred grove, there were those who listened to the river and kept the balance. She looked toward the cracked fields behind the village. You took and took and took, and when the water withdrew, you needed a devil to blame. One of the villagers, a woman whose child Mila had once saved from fever, fell sobbing into the mud. Please, please forgive us. Mila's expression hardened. Did you forgive me? The drowned things behind her began to move, not quickly. That made it worse. They stepped from the water one by one, reeds dripping from their bodies, and the river swelled around their feet as if eager to follow. The villagers ran. Some slipped in the mud. Some dropped their lanterns and vanished into the dark. Others stood frozen, too starved and terrified to think. Yerema turned to flee, but roots erupted from the bank and wrapped around his legs. He shrieked as the mud swallowed him to the waist. No, he screamed. Take her! She belongs to you. The Vodyanoi regarded him with ancient disgust. She was never yours to give. The roots pulled Yerema under. The mud closed over his mouth. His cries ended in bubbles. Panic spread through the village like fire. Doors slammed. Windows shuttered. Mothers clutched children to their chests. Men barred houses with trembling hands. But the river had already crossed the threshold. Water seeped through floorboards, rose from wells, spilled from cooking pots left dry for months. In every corner of Dubrava, people heard dripping where no water should have been. Then came the knocking, soft at first, then louder. Every door in the village. Knock, knock, knock. Some opened. Those were the first to die. By dawn, mist lay over Dubrava like a burial cloth. The drought was broken. Rain fell at last, slow and cold. It washed the blood from the square. It filled the wells. It ran from the roofs in silver streams. But no one came out to bless it. The village had become a place of hushed doors and haunted eyes. Not all had died that night. That was never Mila's way. Some punishments rot longer when they are remembered. Father Mikhail lived. He wandered the ruined church alone, no longer preaching, no longer certain whom he served. They said his hair had turned white before sunrise. Each evening he carried bread to the riverbank and left it there without a word. A few children lived too. They said the little ones had been spared because they had not yet learned the hunger of adults. As for Mila, she was seen only once more. A fisherman from a neighboring settlement claimed he saw her standing in the dawn mist where the river widened into black reeds. She wore a dark green gown that moved as if underwater, even in still air. Around her stood pale figures half hidden by fog. Beside her loomed the Vodyanoi, silent as a drowned king. The fisherman said Mila did not look like a captive. She looked like a queen, and yet the tale does not end in triumph. Because power gained from pain is never clean. Each spring after that, when the snows melted and the river swelled, travelers heard singing from beneath the water. A woman's voice, beautiful enough to stop the heart. Men followed it into the reeds and were found days later floating face down, their mouths full of river grass. But others told a different story. They said that when greedy lords came to cut the sacred willows, their axes rusted in their hands. When soldiers tried to ford the river with fire and iron, the water rose and dragged their horses under. When mothers brought fevered children to the bank and begged with honest tears, the water cooled the child's brow. So what was Mila in the end? Witch, bride, avenger, guardian, monster, perhaps all of them. That is the way with old things. The deeper they live, the less they care for the names of men. And the Vodyanoi? He was never the beast in the story. He did what rivers do. He remembered. He waited. He gave life, and when dishonored, he took it back. Even now, in forgotten places where black water moves beneath willow roots, old villagers still warn their children not to throw stones into the river, not to mock the drowned, not to spit into running water, and never, ever to offer an innocent life in payment for the sins of the guilty. Because the river is listening, because hunger can turn a village into a pack of wolves, because some brides are not taken, some return, and when they do not come back alone.